Welcome back to my channel, and in this video I'm going to talk about Pavlov's theory of classical conditioning. So Ivan Pavlov's theory of classical conditioning is one of the foundational theories in the field of behavioral psychology. So first of all, let's look at discovery. Pavlov discovered classical conditioning unintentionally during his research on the digestive systems of dogs, for which he won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1904. Unconditioned stimulus. In his experiments, Pavlov identified an unconditioned stimulus, something that naturally and automatically triggers a response. In his famous dog experiments, the unconditioned stimulus was food. Unconditioned response. The response that the unconditioned stimulus naturally triggers is known as the unconditioned response. In Pavlov's experiment, the unconditioned response was the dog's salivation upon seeing food. Neutral stimulus. Pavlov then introduced a neutral stimulus, something that by itself caused no response. In his experiment, this was the sound of a bell. Conditioning. During the conditioning phase, Pavlov would ring the bell, which is the neutral stimulus, and then give the dogs food, unconditioned stimulus. After repeating this process, the dogs started to associate the sound of the bell with food. Conditioned stimulus. The previously neutral stimulus, through repeated association with the unconditioned stimulus, becomes a conditioned stimulus. In Pavlov's experiment, the sound of the bell became a conditioned stimulus. Conditioned response. After conditioning, the conditioned stimulus triggers a conditional response. In the case of Pavlov's dogs, they began to salivate. Conditioned response. In response to the sound of the bell, conditioned stimulus, even when no food was present. Extinction. If the conditioned stimulus, the bell, continued to be presented without the unconditioned stimulus, the food, the conditioned response, salivation, would eventually stop. This process is known as extinction. Spontaneous recovery. After rest period, presenting the conditioned stimulus, bell, might once again trigger the conditioned response, salivation. This return of the conditioned response is known as spontaneous recovery. Generalization and discrimination. Pavlov also found that dogs would salivate to similar sounds, which is a generalization, and could be trained to respond differently to distinct stimuli, discrimination. Pavlov's theory of classical conditioning has had a significant influence on the field of psychology and has been applied in various forms of behavioral therapy. Learning by association. Pavlov's theory emphasizes that learning occurs through association, establishing a link between previously neutral stimulus and an unconditioned stimulus. Timing of stimuli. The timing of the presentation of stimuli is important for conditioning to occur. The conditioned stimulus needs to come just before the unconditioned stimulus for the association to be made. Repeated pairings. Conditioning often requires several pairs of the unconditioned stimulus and the conditioned stimulus. One-time pairing may not be sufficient for the association to be made. Prediction and expectation. The theory suggests that the conditioned response occurs because the conditioned stimulus sets up an expectation or prediction of the unconditioned stimulus. Behaviorism. Pavlov's work laid much of the groundwork for the behaviorist theories that would dominate psychology in the mid-20th century. Behaviorism focuses on observable behaviors that can be measured objectively. Applications in real life. Classical conditioning theory has found applications in various areas, such as marketing, teaching, and psychotherapy. For example, in advertising, an appealing image like a celebrity can be paired with a product to elicit a positive response. Counter-conditioning. This is a therapeutic technique where a stimulus is paired with a new positive response to replace a negative or undesired response. This is often used to treat phobias or anxiety disorders. Phobias and fear conditioning. Many psychologists believe that phobias develop as a result of classical conditioning when a neutral stimulus gets associated with a fear or anxiety response. Limitation of Pavlov's theory. Classical conditioning does not consider cognitive processes or biological influences, focusing instead of only an observational behavior. It also doesn't account for complex human behaviors that involve decision-making, problem-solving, and creativity. Beyond Pavlov. Following Pavlov, other psychologists have expanded upon classical conditioning theory. For example, John Watson, the founder of behaviorism, applied the principles of classical conditioning in his experiments. Later, B.F. Skinner developed the concept of operant conditioning, which involves learning through the consequences of voluntary behavior. That's it for today. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Bye for now, and see you in the next video. Bye.